Two former National Cabinet ministers today argued in the High Court that they played no role in the leak of Winston Peters' pension overpayment prior to the last election. But Paula Bennett and Ms Tolley have both admitted passing on the confidential information to others, with Ms Tolley revealing she told her sister in a regrettable outburst. The former ministers are being sued by the New Zealand First Leader, who claims they breached his privacy. Our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, is covering the case at the High Court in Auckland.
In the heat of the 2017 election campaign, several phone calls were made to newsrooms around the country. An anonymous tip-off that Winston Peters had been overpaid his pension.
I did not make the phone call and I had no involvement with this phone call.
And I have no knowledge of who did make these phone calls.
Paula Bennett and Ms Tolley were both ministers at the time. Both had been briefed on the case under the No Surprises policy. Mrs Bennett by the State Services Commissioner, Ms Tolley by MSD.
What could you as a minister do with that information?
Nothing.
But both Cabinet ministers then passed on the confidential information to others. Ms Tolley says she sought advice from the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff and her senior advisor. The advisor, whose name is suppressed, then told others in the office.
I'm disappointed that he did, because I expressly told him that it was confidential and it wasn't to go any further than between him and me.
Ms Tolley also told her husband,
"It's quite a stressful life being a politician at times, and I know I can absolutely trust his confidentiality."
And she also mentioned the overpayment to her sister, who had made a glowing comment about the New Zealand First Leader.
I responded with words to the effect that Mr Peters was not as great as she thought he was, and that he'd been receiving a single superannuation payment when he was living with someone else. I sincerely regret my outburst with my sister. I was tired and I was cross.
Ms Tolley says none of the people she told could be responsible for the leak, as she never told them the amount Mr Peters had paid back, and media had already been tipped off by the time she told her sister. But Winston Peters' lawyer, Brian Henry, posed a certain scenario.
Someone gets a little bit tired, a little bit cross, a little bit drunk, a little bit carried away with their self-importance.
I wasn't drunk.
I'm not suggesting you were.
I thought you were.
No. I'm suggesting this is the problem with the dispersal of this information.
He went on.
And it just comes out.
Well, then they wouldn't be that trustworthy.
Well, you see, you did that.
Yep.
So you're saying you're not trustworthy?
I wasn't in that circumstance. I regret it.
Her national colleague, Paula Bennett, was also asked whether someone could let gossip slip in a moment of stress or intoxication.
I have no idea what other people do when they're stressed or intoxicated.
Just asking you as someone experienced in the world, if you agree with that proposition?
Westie, if we've got something to say to people, we say it straight to them. We don't sort of gossip about them behind their back.
And in the pub, they don't gossip behind anybody's back in the West?
No, mate, they say it straight to them. They invite you for a drink.
Mrs Bennett admits she too passed the information on, telling both the then leader Bill English and her colleague Stephen Joyce, but after the leak to reporters and with minimal detail. From Auckland for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.